Hello everyone. This is going to be a slightly different video. This is not a ship review. This is not an actual World of Warships Blitz video. This is a bit more of a mixture of a personal rant with a sort of slant or trigger coming from World of Warships Blitz. So if you're after the latest ship reviews, then this is not the video for you. But if you don't mind a little bit of an insight into the software industry in general, my personal take and what that has to do with World of Warships Blitz, then stay on for the next couple of minutes. I'll leave some game footage in the background so you've got something to watch, rather than just listen to me rumbling on an empty screen. Now, generally, I do try to be relatively positive about things, especially understanding when it comes to problems with software. And the reason for that, for those of you who haven't been around for an awful lot of time on the channel, is that I used to work as a software engineer. I've been in the industry for 27 years, and I actually quit in January this year. It's been almost a year, actually, that I've been out. But there are a couple of reasons for it. And this is where it sort of ties in to World of Warships Blitz. Because as you may have noticed, and many of you have complained about, every time there is an update and every time the servers get restarted, there are some more or less severe problems. It's to the point that probably the first couple of days after a new release I generally recommend just taking a break and doing something else until they've ironed all the things out. So why is that? Why do we face these problems? Why do you have something that works, like, I don't know, your friends list or logging into the game, suddenly stop working after an update? Why is that? Now, I am not a games developer, so I am not familiar with the frameworks, with the ecosystem, with the gaming engines, with the standards within the industry as a whole. But I come from a background in software engineering in, software industry. So I used to work usually in either manufacturing or in actual software tooling businesses. And the last role I had was in a very large company. And I was part of a team that was responsible for releasing their flagship cloud product. So we did continuous integration, release management, automated testing, quality assurance, all these kind of things. And that was the biggest product and flagship product of the company, and it was a rather large company. So in the software tooling industry. So that's an area where I feel, well, A, I know a little bit about, and B, I am somewhat passionate about the whole quality aspect, and which is why I'm talking about it, because this is exactly what's happening, right? Somebody makes a new release, there are changes, and stuff just breaks. Now, in today's cloud environments, you get releases all the time. So if you're looking at a website or any kind of online system that gets updated without you noticing on the server side continuously, continuous integration and continuous deployment often means that big businesses would release daily and bring out new features and bug fixes daily. Whereas a game like Warships Blitz, and probably have to preface that here as well, because I don't work for Wargaming, I have no insight into their processes or their code base. So anything I say about it is pure speculation on my side, coming out of my experience on the industry. So take that with a grain of salt. But releases happen not that frequently, which means that for a reasonable period of time, someone has been making changes on code until you get a new version that is ready to be played. And then you get an update on the client, which is on your phone, and there's an update on the server side. Now, it is entirely possible that they're updating the servers more frequently without us noticing, because they control that, and you don't have to download anything for that. But there's a sort of cadence of changes that accumulate, and then when all these changes are completed, then something gets released. This sort of approach requires a relatively rigorous approach to testing. Now, testing for quality in software is nothing new. It has been around for decades. And when I started, testing was a thing. So this has been around since the early 2000s, that we do automated testing. Generally, when you write code, you also write tests for this code. There are whole ecosystems and industries built around quality assurance, built around detecting the test coverage of your code, the quality of helping with figuring out the quality of your code, making sure that you are actually assuring that your code works before you release it. That is sort of the first line of defense, right? So you should have, for every change, before you even make a change, as a software engineer, you look, is there test coverage for this change? And if there isn't, you add it. And then you make the change, and then you see that your test breaks because you've just changed something, so your assumptions are now no longer correct. Then you correct the assumptions, and then your test goes green, so red before green, and then you have a reasonable amount of confidence that your code that you've added does what you think it does. Now, that is the first line. Then you actually have to deal with all the things that aren't code. So all the environment, the servers, the network configuration, firewall rules, various other systems that you're interacting with that do not get released at the same time. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, a backend server gets a release, but the authentication system that deals with logins is a completely different service that does not get released at the same time. This is a common occurrence in modern systems. And again, I have no idea if this applies to games like Warships Blitz, but splitting services into multiples to make it easier to release them individually works and is a common thing that we do. But it brings a whole new set of challenges because you are now running a newer version of the software against the same other service that does, for example, authentication. So your assumptions around how authentication works needs to be reassessed because that's a bit of code that is actually living somewhere completely differently. And that means after your actual testing is done, you need to then run through some form of staging, which means you're actually deploying your code somewhere to a server in a separated environment, and you're running another set of tests, of integration tests, to make sure that, yes, my code works in isolation in a unit, but what if I deploy the whole thing to a service that talks to a database, that talks to other services, that talks to the internet, that has network configuration, that has all kinds of things, and then I run another set of tests to make sure that that stuff actually works. And once everything has made its way through initial testing and through staging, then you start making a production rollout. Ideally, you make production rollouts gradual, but for something like games where you don't actually control the client version that easily, it can be rather tricky. So what you do then is you aggressively monitor. So you have systems in place that keep a very close eye on your release and make sure that all the functions, all the features are working. You monitor for errors, you monitor for resource overload, you monitor for changes in traffic patterns, you monitor for all kinds of things. You can run synthetic tests. So, for example, let's talk about logins, right? You could run a sort of guard dog system, a watchdog system that continuously logs into your service, and if it detects that it can't log in, then it raises an alarm. And in the industry, those things, there are people with actual pagers who get brought up in the middle of the night, woken up, and have to go online to fix things because something broke for your customers. So that is sort of the general quality control setup that you would do for a modern industry system. And again, I have no idea how this is done in games, but the problems we're seeing here are very reminiscent of things I've seen in the past. Because you see, all the stuff that I've just been explaining is, for software engineers, often considered as overhead. It is additional stuff that you need to do that isn't feature work. So you write a feature, you make a change, you add a new feature, you add a new ship, but then you have to do all this other stuff. Then you have to do the testing and the monitoring and the release management, and you have to respond to things. And you really don't want to, because A, this isn't as fun for most people, and B, this is often not incentivized because the pressure from management is usually on the frequency of feature releases. So it's like, okay, we have a deadline, we have a timeline within this segment of work of 3 months. We want to get features A, B, and C done. And we want them out there. And then we move on to the next features, because features is what brings you money. So the pressure for management on engineering is usually to accelerate development and shipping of features. And here lies the problem of the whole thing. And this is one of the major reasons, besides the obvious health reasons that I've talked about in the past, that I have actually quit the industry. Now, you have to understand that most software written today is not written well. Because while we might call ourselves software engineers, and I'm putting big air quotes here around the word, most software development has nothing to do with actual engineering principles or engineering practices. As an analogy, probably, imagine if we were building cars today with modern engines, but the chassis of the car and the seat, whatever is inside, is still from the 1910s. And you'd say, oh, mama, that is hugely dangerous. You'd be driving these things at 130 kilometers an hour over a highway. And there's basically rickety spoke wheels. And there's no such thing as seat belts. There's barely a windscreen. There's no such thing as airbags. We have this technology. Why don't you build it? And the answer is, from the industry, usually, it takes too long. And we don't have time for that. We have to make the car faster because that's what people care about. And we can't get people qualified to build these kind of things, or we can't find anybody who would be interested in building these kind of things because everybody just wants to make faster cars because we pay our people by how much faster they've made the car, not how much safer they have made it. And that, in a nutshell, is the software industry. That leads to, we have techniques we've been having them for decades on how to better write software. We're talking about side effects. We're talking about architectural principles, event-driven systems, all kinds of things that aren't easy to patch on to something afterwards. Sticking with the car analogy, you know when people build prototypes, it's like a wooden frame with some paint on it, and they build the prototype as a demonstrator to say, look, this is what that looks like. In the software industry, we'd stick an engine into it and start making 100,000 of them and start selling them. And every time somebody in software says, oh, this is just a prototype, we'll do it properly later on, they will not. Because of inherent complexity. Because the code base will get complex, you shipped it to production, you have no buy-in from management to do major reworks, you can't justify not shipping anything for 6 months or 12 months to rebuild it all from scratch. So what you do is you patch around on it. So you, instead of building an airbag, you strap a cushion onto the steering wheel. And then you find out that nobody can steer the car anymore because there's a cushion on it. Okay, so you find a solution for that by making the cushion round. And then you have the cushion sit in the middle, but you can still steer the car. And it's that sort of Rube Goldberg machine that modern software looks like, because of these pressures and because of time to market pressure and because a lot of people just don't get an education. And if they do get an education in computer science, which has usually not much to do with software engineering, if they do get an education in computer science, they don't get to apply these things in businesses because what they get thrown into is a code base that's 20 years old, that is complete rubbish and basically needs to be burned down to the ground and redone from scratch properly, but you don't have the thought leaders or the people with experience to guide a herd of engineers who all want to do their own thing in their own ways, which is whatever they looked up on Stack Overflow. And they just want to get things done, want to get it done quickly and want to be rewarded for it because there's no actual pride in engineering, but there's more of a get ahead by releasing things quickly, sort of, and shipping features fast, sort of way. Zuckerberg has made it clear, and he was actually proud of that, and it's hilarious. Move fast and break things. That is exactly what's happening everywhere. It's the Facebookization of software engineering. It's the micro-controlling of metrics and KPIs for developers, trying to measure them, trying to make them into little interchangeable human machines that produce features. And nobody gives a crap about architecture, quality, or doing these things. Now, again, I do not know if this applies to wargaming. I don't know how NetEase develops things. I don't know how the contracts are set up. I don't know how the internal practices are. This is just a general view from my perspective on the industry. And looking at the kind of problems we're getting, maybe you now understand a little bit better as to why this happens, right? Why does this happen? Because you have a big ball of mud software, nothing is properly separated, you've got side effects all over the place, everything depends on not just the code, but the state outside the code. Things depend on databases. Things depend on things being somewhere else across the network. There's no testing infrastructure. There's no procedure of rigorous release management. There's most likely manual testing, because that's the only thing you can do in a system that isn't designed to be automatically testable. Because automatic testing is not something you can retrofit onto systems that aren't written properly. You end up with more trouble than it's worth it. You have to design your system from the ground up to be testable, otherwise you're not getting it. And most projects like that don't have that, and hence all the bugs are showing up in production. In German we say it's banana software, it ripens at the customer. And this is exactly what we're seeing. A new set of features get released, and in the process we have broken 5 other things of various severity and complexity, and then the only way we can go is move forward. Nobody rolls back. No, we have to move forward. That means the customers have to live, and customers in this case is the player base, has to live with the broken stuff for a week or so, and then it gets fixed by a hot fix or by the next patch or something like that. And it's not just Warships Blitz, right? Like if you look at AAA games that come out, they're almost unplayable mostly at the time of release, because things that get rushed out of the studio and up to the customers, and then by the time people actually start playing stuff, it barely holds together, and then it takes months or even years to iron out most of the stuff. And this is why I'm ranting about it, because personally I am really passionate about quality, but there are very, very few of us. I've worked with people who are thinking the same way, but what burns us out in the industry is the inertia of the rest of it. And then people look at you and saying, what do you mean you want to spend another 2 days on quality and you want to re-architect this thing which doesn't give any new features to the customer? You don't get to do that. You don't get time for that. Are you stupid? We just have to release things, because that's all we care about. We only care about getting features out, because features make money. Quality doesn't make money. And that's where sort of we're in this weird place where the world has been conditioned to think that software is inherently broken, and we accept it. We accept that Windows is broken. We accept that games come out with bugs. We still buy them because what else are we going to do? Because that's the stuff it is. But you could say, oh yeah, I accept that 10% of the people die in this new car, but that's fine. We'll buy it anyway, because what else are we going to do? Ride a horse? Play a board game? That's why we're in this weird situation where there is actually no legitimate market back pressure, where people don't say, no, stop buying this. And there are positive things. Like, for example, in the last company I worked in, if an enterprise customer had an outage that broke an SLA, a service level agreement, where you'd say you can have X hours per year of unavailability. And if you break that agreement, what happened was they basically got their time refunded, because they had to pay for cloud software. And if that stuff was breaking SLA, they get the money back. Imagine this in a game like Warships Blitz, where you say, I have purchased the Blitz Pass, and or I have, for example, right? Or I've spent X amount of gold on crates. No idea how you'd measure this, but I say I've spent X amounts of gold on a crate for this event that is worth $100 in my currency, and the event hasn't been available, or sufficient parts of the event haven't been available that it breaks the service level agreement. I get a refund. I get actual money back. And this is the sort of stuff that we need in the industry to get that pressure, that market pressure towards quality, that people don't just accept this kind of stuff anymore, but push back against companies and saying, no, you're not getting away with this. You're not getting to publish a signature update in the middle of the Windows kernel worldwide without any checks and balances and blow up half the world's computers. That sort of stuff bankrupts your company. And until we get to these kind of engineering practices, then that's when we actually can start calling ourselves software engineers. That's when the market pressure is there to say, no, we actually can't just ship something quickly. We have to do it right. And the funny bit and the sad bit and the reason I quit is, if you do it right, you're actually much faster. You're cutting a corner, you're cutting out a day or two of work, to save that early on, and it costs you 1,000 days down the road because of the cumulative complexity that is built upon the crap that you've started out with. And that's the sad part, that people don't realize, and everybody accepts that, even inside the industry, saying, yeah, I needed to hire another 100 people to keep this thing running. That's normal. No, it isn't. If we hadn't cut a day or two early in development, we wouldn't have this problem today. If we had done it right, if we actually educated people and guided people, and not just get everybody sat on their chair and saying, here, go ahead, you're a software engineer, you're full stack, you're a database admin, security, financial optimization, back-end, front-end software engineer. Go do it, right? I'm just here to manage. I'm just telling you which features I want. You go and figure it out. No, that's not how you develop software. And that in the past, like 40 years ago, that isn't how we developed software. But that is how we develop software today. That is the reason I quit personally, and I don't want to have anything to do with the software engineering industry anymore. And that is a painful reminder every time I see an update in a new update in Warships Blitz. I understand the engineers on the other side. You can't blame them. It's not their fault necessarily. Part of it is because as an engineer, it's also your responsibility to come down harder and saying, no, I am no longer tolerating this. But it's at the end of the day, there's not an awful lot you can do about it, especially if you have an established code base. There's no way that you're fixing this kind of stuff. So have an understanding for the engineers, and at the same time, make it clear that towards companies, if your software is crap, I ain't paying for it. And maybe we'll one day live in a better world. Until then, let's just enjoy the game as we can, and put it aside the first couple of days after new versions get released, because most likely something is going to be broken again. And now you maybe have a little bit better of an idea why that is. And that's it for me today. Thanks for listening to my little rambling, and wish you all a good one. See you next time. Bye-bye.